Hi, everyone. I'm Bonita from Pennies to Dollars, and thank you for joining me today. I'm early retired. I am a Kansas native, and I do what I can to save money in any ways that I possibly can so that I have money to do the fun stuff that I want to do. Now, today I'm going to share with you some of the ways that I have saved money lately and some of the ways that I just save money all the time. And one of those is stacking deals. I will stack any deals that I possibly can. So when I'm going to my grandkids' ball games, it's going to be at least an hour each way to go to their events. So when I get gas, I use my Upside app and I claim that offer and I make sure that I'm getting cash back on my gasoline for my car. But I'm also going to use a credit card that is going to give me 1.5% back when I use it. So I use every single avenue I possibly can to try to save money. This last trip that I went in to a basketball game for my third grade grandson, I took in my pop cans that I had been saving and the aluminum cans that I had backstashed from events where maybe family was at the house and they had cans that need tossed. I keep an aluminum bag going all the time. Well, those cans are now up to 72 cents here in Kansas a pound. So when I took them in, I got $9 in cash. Well, that paid for my inexpensive car to get gas. And then I used those two cashback options that I just shared. So I stacked those deals to pay for that trip to the ball game. The next one that I'm doing this quarter is I'm using my Discover card to get 5% cash back at grocery stores. January, February, and March this year is Discover 5% cash back on grocery stores. So you have to activate that offer, and then I make sure that I use that credit card whenever I get groceries, and then I'm able to get cash back towards my grocery budget, as well as stacking coupons, stacking rebates, and trying to get the best deals that I can. And that is something I take advantage of every time they offer that. Now, I never charge anything that I don't already have the money to pay for. And that's the trick in using credit cards is you don't want to charge food that you can't pay for. The third thing is I'm using up whatever I can to be frugal around the house. This week we had some hamburger stew. I had some frozen crushed tomatoes in a container in the deep freeze. I used those. I had some frozen diced tomatoes in the deep freeze. I also used those. I had some frozen green beans that anybody would have probably seen them and said, those are freezer burnt. Well, you rinse off a little bit of ice that's on those green beans. You throw them in the pot with all of your seasonings of your stew, and they fluff right back up, and no one ever would know there was anything wrong with them. There wasn't a weird taste or anything. So I do not throw that stuff out. I have found that if you rinse off that ice before you toss it in a stew pot, you're not even going to know that they looked a little pruny when you pulled them out of the deep freeze. I also used only 2 small potatoes and I diced them really, really fine, along with carrots, celery that I grew right here in my inside garden, and some onion. And I used about a half of a cup of quinoa instead of extra potatoes. My husband is recently diabetic, and quinoa actually will work more as fiber instead of a starch. So we will be putting that in some of our dishes to substitute for what I would normally use a lot of potatoes in. Another thing that I researched this week is I can still use my rice. I just need to make sure that it's refrigerated for 12 hours before, or it has been made and then frozen. That again changes the way rice reacts in the system and lowers its glucose level. So I can still have rice. I just need to think ahead just a little bit. A lot of times when we have dietary restrictions, that is when our budget and our food costs go up. But I am up for the challenge to find ways that we can still cook frugally, even with his dietary restrictions of being diabetic and gluten free. I remember a time when I was raising my kids, like in the 90s, where everything that was a recipe called for some sort of creamed soup in the can. And that's something that we just don't buy anymore because they all have gluten in them. So you can make that two different ways from scratch. You can either make it with fresh ingredients with 3 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of flour, pepper and salt to taste, and then make like a roux out of that and add a half of a cup of chicken broth, a half of a cup of milk, and a fourth of a teaspoon of onion powder. But I prefer to make the shelf stable kind. That way I can just grab a third of a cup of the mix and add a fourth of a cup of water, and I already have it ready to go. So if you want to make that in a jar and then just keep it ready to go, all that needs is 2 cups of dried milk, 3/4 of a cup of cornstarch, a half of a teaspoon of pepper, a fourth of a cup of instant chicken bouillon granules, and 2 tablespoons of dried minced onion. And these recipes are in my 50 frugal recipes when cooking on a budget cookbook. I use this all the time and I keep it handy because it has all of the recipes that I use, and a lot of them have gluten-free and dairy-free options. But if you want to make some of these things from scratch, you don't have to break the bank and you don't have to buy the gluten-free options in the store that cost so much money. A can of gluten-free soup is like $1.70 something here, and making that is a lot easier. I already have all of the ingredients here at home. I don't have to buy anything to make it, and I have it at my fingertips. I just wanted to quickly remind you that that recipe that I just gave you for that shelf-stable bulk cream of soup mix, it needs to be a third of a cup of the mix and a fourth of a cup of water in a saucepan, and then just mix that up until it thickens. Don't use that entire recipe that I just gave you. That was a bulk recipe. So sometimes it feels like if we're on a fixed income and we're retired, or even if we are still working and we have children, that our money is limited. And when things crop up like dietary restrictions or extra trips to ball games and events, it will feel overwhelming and it will feel like, where are we supposed to come up with this extra money to do these things? Do we put it on a card? And I just want to encourage you that in my life, I have found that if I can just take a step back and stop and think for a minute, a lot of times I can think myself out of a situation that would have just been a knee-jerk reaction to spend money to make it an easier fix. Sometimes if I just stop and think, I'm like, okay, there's a way for me to stack deals so I can get better gasoline prices for these extra trips. Okay, there's ways for me to outsmart this new dietary restriction and still use the supplies that I have on hand and make it where I don't have to buy extra special items to cook with to meet that dietary restriction. We all face things like this in our daily lives that feel like it is overwhelming and that it's going to cost us more money and we don't know where it's going to come from. So I hope this video has encouraged you to maybe think about some of that before you pull out that credit card, and see if there's a way that you can figure out a way that it won't cost you more money to approach or deal with whatever you have coming up on the horizon. Thank you for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I always appreciate the time that you spend with me. Give me a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in the next one.